Chapter 2. The Kowtow Question and the Opium War. At the close of the 18th century, China stood at the height of its imperial greatness. The Qing Dynasty, established in 1644 by Manchu tribes riding into China from the northeast, had turned China into a major military power. Fusing Manchu and Mongol military prowess with the cultural and governmental prowess of the Han Chinese, it embarked on a program of territorial expansion to the north and west, establishing a Chinese sphere of influence deep into Mongolia, Tibet, and modern-day Xinjiang. China stood predominant in Asia. It was at least the rival of any empire on earth. Yet the high point of the Qing dynasty also turned into the turning point of its destiny. For China's wealth and expanse attracted the attention of Western empires and trading companies operating far outside the bounds and conceptual apparatus of the traditional Chinese world order. For the first time in its history, China faced barbarians who no longer sought to displace the Chinese dynasty and claim the mandate of heaven for themselves. Instead, they proposed to replace the Sinocentric system with an entirely new vision of world order, with free trade rather than tribute, resident embassies in the Chinese capital, and a system of diplomatic exchange that did not refer to non-Chinese heads of state as honorable barbarians pledging fealty to their emperor in Beijing. Unbeknownst to Chinese elites, these foreign societies had developed new industrial and scientific methods that, for the first time in centuries, or perhaps ever, surpassed China's own. Steam power, railways, and new methods of manufacturing and capital formation enabled enormous advances in productivity in the West. Imbued with a conquering impulse that propelled them into China's traditional sphere of dominance, the Western powers considered Chinese claims of universal overlordship over Europe and Asia risible. They were determined to impose on China their own standards of international conduct, by force if necessary. The resulting confrontation challenged the basic Chinese cosmology and left wounds still festering over a century later in an age of restored Chinese eminence. Beginning in the 17th century, Chinese authorities had noted the increasing numbers of European traders on the southeast China coast. They saw little to differentiate the Europeans from other foreigners operating at the fringes of the empire, save perhaps their particularly glaring lack of Chinese cultural attainments. In the official Chinese view, these West Sea barbarians were classified as tribute envoys or barbarian merchants. On rare occasions, some were permitted to travel to Beijing, where, if admitted into the presence of the emperor, they were expected to perform the ritual Kowtow, the act of prostration, with the forehead touching the ground 3 times. For foreign representatives, the points of entry into China and routes to the capital were strictly circumscribed. Access to the Chinese market was limited to a tightly regulated seasonal trade at Guangzhou, then known as Canton. Each winter foreign merchants were required to sail home. They were not permitted to venture further into China. Regulations deliberately held them at bay. It was unlawful to teach the Chinese language to these barbarians or to sell them books on Chinese history or culture. Their communications were to take place through specially licensed local merchants. The notion of free trade, resident embassies, and sovereign equality, by this point, the minimum rights enjoyed by Europeans in almost every other corner of the world, were unheard of in China. One tacit exception had been made for Russia. Its rapid eastward expansion, the Tsar's domains now abutted Qing territories in Xinjiang, Mongolia, and Manchuria, placed it in a unique position to threaten China. The Qing dynasty, in 1715, permitted Moscow to establish a Russian Orthodox mission in Beijing. It eventually took on the role of a de facto embassy, the only foreign mission of its kind in China for over a century. The contacts extended to Western European traders, limited as they were seen by the Qing as a considerable indulgence. The Son of Heaven had, in the Chinese view, shown his benevolence by allowing them to partake in Chinese trade, particularly in tea, silk, lacquer ware, and rhubarb, for which the West Sea barbarians had developed a voracious appetite. Europe was too far from the Middle Kingdom ever to become Sinicized along Korean or Vietnamese lines. Initially, the Europeans accepted the role of supplicants in the Chinese tributary order, in which they were labeled as barbarians and their trade as tribute. But as the Western powers grew in wealth and conviction, this state of affairs grew untenable.